to the January 11th, 2021 Historic Zoning Commission. I'd like to call the meeting to order, and first of all, I'd like to welcome Kathy Worthington to her first meeting as a new commissioner. Kathy, I'm going to ask you just in a few minutes to give a little of your background, so it will be just about a 1-minute background information for our commissioner since we're all not present in the same room. But to start off the meeting tonight, I'd like to call the roll. Please respond when I call your name. Kelly Baker.
Present.
Susan Besser. I see her present. She's muted, but I know she's present.
Present, sorry.
Brian Laster.
Present.
Lisa Marquardt.
Present.
Mary Pierce.
Present.
Ken Scalf is absent. Kathy Worthington.
Present.
Great. You mastered it.
There you go.
And Jim Roberts present. Now I'd like to entertain a motion to approve Resolution 2020-273, a resolution declaring that the Historic Zoning Commission shall meet on January the 11th, 2021, and conduct its essential business by electronic means rather than being required to gather a quorum of the members physically present in the same location because it is necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of Tennesseans in light of the COVID-19 outbreak. Is there such a motion?
Mr. Chair, this is Brian. So moved.
Thank you, Brian.
Second.
Oh,
Who was that? Mary? Oh, Kelly. Thank you, Kelly. Okay, please respond then. Kelly Baker.
Aye.
Susan Besser.
Aye.
Brian Laster.
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt.
Aye.
Mary Pierce.
aye.
Ken Scalf, absent. Kathy Worthington.
Aye.
Jim Roberts, aye. To prevent the spread of COVID-19 and to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the city of Franklin, officials, staff, and citizens, the Historic Zoning Commission will restrict physical access in the meeting room to a small number of staff members due to current limitations on public gatherings. Accommodations have been made to ensure the public is still able to participate in the meeting. The public may participate in the following ways. Watch the meeting on Franklin TV or the City of Franklin website. Watch the live stream through the City of Franklin Facebook and YouTube accounts. Call into the meeting at 312-626-6799, meeting ID 942-7737-3966, password 566959. Callers will be unmuted and given the opportunity to comment during the meeting at specific times. Limited viewing will be available in the lobby of City Hall for up to 10 persons, but in-person comment in the boardroom will not be available. The public may email comments to planningintake@franklintn.gov to be provided in full to the commission and included in the minutes, but not read aloud in their entirety during the meeting. Email comments will be accepted until 12 noon the day of the meeting. Now, before we go to minutes, Kathy Worthington, would you give the commission a little bit of your background? Because I think it's pretty interesting.
Okay, I'll keep it short. I'm a native of New Orleans, New Orleanian. I'm a professional interior designer. I've been practicing from 1980 till 2016 when I moved to Franklin. I'm teaching at Belmont right now in their interior design program and loving it, loving living in Franklin. Most of my work was centered around historical properties, both residential and commercial, both in the French Quarter and the Vieux Carré Commission, and also working on public housing. So we had a lot of historical concerns on these projects, but my side has always been as the applicant side. And so moving here, it's nice not to have to be in the work world. I enjoy teaching and I'm honored to be on this commission. So that's my story.
Well, thanks. That's great. We look forward to having you join us and receiving your input on these various matters that we get to.
Yeah,
Thank you.
welcome,
Before us.
welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move into the minutes. Everybody received the December 14th minutes. Is there a motion to approve those?
So moved.
Thank you, Mary. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Kelly. Okay, please respond when I call your name. Kelly Baker,
Aye.
Susan Besser,
Aye.
Brian Laster,
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt,
Aye.
Mayor Pierce,
Aye.
Kathy Worthington,
Aye.
and Jim Roberts, aye. Okay. Now we must go into a motion to approve the 2021 commission chair and then a subsequent motion for the vice chair. So is there such a motion?
I am wholeheartedly giving a motion to reappoint the commission chair and the vice chair. Do we have to do separate motions or on the
Well,
same?
I guess we don't have to. We can combine it.
Okay,
And Mr. Chair, I'll second that.
All right. Okay, that'd be myself as the chair and Mary as the vice chair. All right, and Brian seconded it. Okay, any comments, any other motions, any other nominees?
I have a comment.
Oh,
I just want to thank Jim and Mary for their commitment to this difficult work. Please don't ever think that you're underestimated. Truly, from the bottom of our hearts, I know I speak for everybody that we are truly grateful for your leadership.
thank you, thank you, thank you very much. Well, I appreciate all of you, and I think Mary does as well, because I think it takes all of us together as a unit and not just one or two of us. So thanks to all of you, and we look forward to another good, interesting year. So with all that said, let's have a vote on this. Kelly Baker,
Aye.
Susan Besser,
Aye.
Brian Laster,
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt,
Aye.
Mary Pierce,
Aye.
Kathy Worthington,
Aye.
and I'm going to just recuse myself on this. So it'll be six and one recusal, but thank you very much. Okay, now the next thing is to approve our calendar for 2021 for both the Historic Zoning Commission and the DRC meetings. You were sent a calendar in your packet, or given a calendar in your packet, and it follows the same format and dates as we had last year, short of the DRC, which is scheduled 1 day later than normal. Just as a reminder, the Historic Zoning Commission meets on the second Monday of each month, and the Design Review Committee on the third Monday of each month. So with that in mind, is there a motion to approve the calendar as submitted?
May I just clarify, just in case it's unclear, that the only date change for DRC was for January only, not for the rest of the year.
Right, I thought that's what I said, but thanks for the correction. All right, is there a motion to approve that calendar then?
So moved. This is Susan.
Thank you, Susan. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, Kelly Baker,
Aye.
Susan Besser,
Aye.
Brian Laster,
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt,
Aye.
Mary Pierce,
Aye.
Kathy Worthington,
Aye.
and Jim Roberts, aye. Are there any non-agenda items to be placed on the agenda? Hearing none from Ms. Rose, are there any citizens' comments on items not on our agenda? None, according to Ms. Dennisfelter. Then we're ready for item number 1, which is consideration of new construction at 326 Fair Park Court. Ms. Rose.
Yes, and I realized that I forgot to add the announcements portion to the roll call. Would it be okay if we covered announcements first, or would you like that to be?
No,
the-
go ahead. Let's
Okay.
go ahead.
I
Otherwise,
apologize.
I'll forget it.
I apologize for that. That was my fault. I did want to note that we do have DRC on Tuesday at 4 o'clock. This is an interruption to the normal calendar based on a city observance of Martin Luther King Day, a very important day. So we appreciate that you were flexible in that. Thank you. Also wanted to note that all of you should have received an email from me, as well as many of our preservation-minded citizens in the community related to a couple of federal preservation grants that the city would like to move forward with submitting an application related to an update to the National Register listing documentation for the Lewisburg Avenue Historic District, and then also for some burial marker restoration work at both City and Rest Haven cemeteries. I am working to see if the city administrator would allow for me to move forward on that endeavor on behalf of the board. But in the meantime, I am working to put those applications together, and I would appreciate any letter of support that you would be willing to share to help show how much our community really values, our historic resources inventory and also those two precious historic resources at the cemeteries. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we're ready for item number 1, new construction at 326 Fair Park. Ms. Rose.
Yes, thank you. The applicant is requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the construction of a 2-story principal structure with an attached 1.5-story garage at Lot 6 at Fair Park Court. The residence is proposed to be situated so the back elevation, the rear elevation backs up to Fair Street. It's on that portion of the street. The Historic Zoning Commission denied issuance of a COA for a previous rendition of this proposal at its October meeting last year. And then the residence is proposed to be situated, I'm reading the previous sentence, sorry. The applicant then revised the proposal and presented it to the DRC for discussion at last month's meeting. As you all know, Hinchyville contains a variety of residential forms, single-family residential forms, dating from the 1828 into the 1950s. So it runs the gamut in terms of architectural styles. The buildings tend to range from 1 to 2 stories, and garages and outbuildings are very common to that neighborhood. The proposed scale of 2 stories for the main portion of the structure is appropriate for the district, and the garage portion is proposed to be at 1.5 stories. The guidelines would recommend that garages be detached where historic garages are generally detached. Attached garages should be designed in such a way that they're located at traditional locations, either behind the rear of the main form of the house or otherwise not visible from the street. Hinchyville does have more detached outbuildings than attached. And because of this, the applicant worked to address some staff and DRC comments related to the massing in order to provide better consistency with the context of that district. To do so, the applicant utilized staff's recommendation to break up the massing by doing what I would call a semi-detached garage. I'm going to pull that up, but essentially the garage is still visible from the street. The way that the lot is configured does not really allow for a garage to be placed behind the main form, but it does have enough width to allow the structure to be somewhat detached and not integrated fully into the main form of the house. And forgive me, my folder closed that I had open to show this to you. I'm pulling it up right now. Okay. So you can see on the screen here, the lot's not very deep, but it is a little wider. And so it does allow for a little bit of separation between these 2 forms to create 2 masses instead of 1. You can see the first floor plan here that the garage is attached with a small connector, and it does read very largely as 2 distinct forms. While the garage can't be behind it, I do believe that it meets the intent of the guideline that the massing is separated. Additionally, the placement of the garage helps serve as a lesser massed transitional piece. You can see from this angle here toward the Fair Street Historic District and the historic forms on Fair Street, I should say. The height of the proposal at 29 feet is mostly consistent with the guidelines. It is consistent with the portion of the guidelines that state that infill construction not exceed an average of 10% above or below the average height of the buildings on the same block face on the same side of the street. The buildings that have been approved for this street, which is a cul-de-sac street, range in height from 32-8, 29-11, and then there is a building on the same block face that is not part of the Fair Park subdivision that is approximately 34 feet in height. The guidelines do also state, however, that the height of infill buildings on newly created streets should be compatible with the range of building heights on the nearest block face within the established historic district. The buildings behind this street on Fair Street range in height approximately from 24 feet to 31 feet. So it does fall within that range, but I don't have the exact heights and cannot do a conducive calculation to say if it's 10% above or below that average. As for materials, the applicant has included a design element on the front elevation. And I'll go ahead and pull the 2D up. So you can see that right here, that is not entirely typical to historic districts. It is the two-story vertical bay. And while it's not typical to Hensheyville, it is a feature seen on some historic structures. The inclusion of the porch and covered balcony area here is what you can see here. And you can sort of see a little better from the side view here. You see it pop out just a tiny bit from the facade. It is a bit atypical, but it's designed so that the porch element is not immediately visible from vantage points to the left or right. As you can see, I had to really point out to you where that was. It's so well integrated into the form. The inset allows for the porch to function without presenting a distraction to the overall context of the district. And further, because this is an infill street and infill construction, the front elevation is not in view of any adjacent historic structures situated behind the property. So this modern interpretation may be appropriate here. Also, in lieu of using an awning on the garage doors, you can see that the applicant has extruded the roof line to create a covering over the garage door area. This is a treatment that allows for the perception of a roof dormer here, which actually is designed as a wall dormer. So it does appear to have a dormer that sits a couple of feet off the roof, even though it's designed truly as a wall dormer. Again, this treatment is atypical to historic structures, but because this is an infill street and both the principal and garage structures are created on this newly created street, this interpretation may be appropriate. The proposed materials are all consistent with the guidelines, though window specifications have not been provided at this time. And the proportion of and rhythm of the window openings are mostly consistent with the guidelines as well. I will note that the applicant did alter the window in the front-facing dormer of the garage to be placed more consistently with that on historic structures based on a design review committee comment. Regardless of the comments for design, the building itself cannot be recommended for approval as the building coverage as shown by the applicant is 36.6%. The guidelines do recommend that building coverage maximum not exceed 35% in specified residential zoning districts, including this one. With that, it would be recommended that the proposal be denied. The proposal, if approved, shall utilize a smooth-faced siding with a historically appropriate profile and dimension, which would be probably a 4 to 5 inch lap reveal. And the windows must have a historic profile and dimension and be submitted to staff for review and approval prior to issuance of a permit. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hathaway. Mr. Hathaway,
Yes, sir.
welcome to Historic Zoning, Mr. Hathaway.
Hey, it's good to be here. You guys look very familiar. Happy New Year to everybody. It's good to be back. Kathy, welcome. I know I've been on your side and now I'm on the other side. So I appreciate all of the work you're going to be doing soon and everybody else. But let me first start by thanking the commission for patience. And as we have addressed a lot of the concerns with this project over the time we presented it and come back with a new scheme, we're excited about the new direction. I think from a massing perspective, we like it a lot better where it is has the feel of a detached garage. Practically, we felt it necessary to have a connection for a lot of reasons, security and and other things from the garage into the house. We have also reduced, if you remember from DRC, we've reduced the size of the front porch in order to reduce the overall coverage. I understand that 35%, believe me, I've been a part of that for 8+ years, talking about that. We did everything we could to try to reduce it, and getting it down to 36.5%, we felt like was consistent with the guidelines, close to what the guidelines are asking for. We're not substantially over that amount, so we would ask for your approval of that because we needed to do that in order to get this freestanding garage look. The upstairs porch, that recessed porch, that was an idea of our client who we originally had that as a 2-story box bay. And they asked, well, can we create a porch on that second level? Because most of their living, this is a 2nd-story living type house. There's going to be an elevator that gets the master bedroom, the master study, et cetera, upstairs. So she'll live mostly upstairs. So a functional porch for her is that inset porch that we've got on that second level. And as Amanda mentioned, that this being an infill, we're asking for sort of an interpretation of what it would have been a porch, second level porch that you might have seen in a more traditional application, but just a modern interpretation of that idea. Like it was said earlier as well, we have worked hard to keep the height low. I think we're at 29.1 now to the top of the roof. And that was after a lot of conversation and effort to try to get that down. So we appreciate your consideration of that as well, and be happy to answer any questions, and we would ask for your approval.
Thank you. Are there any citizens who wish to comment on this application? Hearing none, is there a motion from the commission?
Mr. Chair, this is Brian.
Okay.
I'd like to start the conversation by moving that we approve issuance of a COA for the proposed new construction based on the staff analysis recommendations dated January the 7th of 2021.
Okay, they're recommending denial. So I need to get a reason for the approval.
Well, I'd like to continue this conversation about that 1.6%.
Okay.
And that's why I'm.
Okay, all right, that's fine. Is there a second to that motion to approve?
I'll second. This is Lisa.
Thank you, Lisa. Okay, now we're ready to discuss.
So, Mike, I do have a question. And that way, you said you've kind of done all you can to reduce that square footage. And you think this is kind of where it needs to be. Could you elaborate on that a little more?
Sure. We worked really hard to try to make sure that we create a house that's livable for our client, and that included the amount of square footage she needed for the living space and dining and kitchen, as well as the garage. As you know, the garage uses up some of that percentage. Where we landed, where it got larger, was when we detached the garage and had that connector. That took us over that 35%. So we're, in practicality, other than the infill between the garage and the main house, we're at 35%. That just puts us over the edge when we have that connector piece.
Thank you for that explanation. I know that there have been a lot of accommodations from the Design Review Committee on this project, and that's why I moved that we approve it.
Okay, other questions, comments?
Mr. Chair, I'll just add that 1.6%, I'm not sure is perceivable. So even if we ask the applicant to adjust it down, I'm not sure that anybody from any view shed would really be able to notice the difference.
Thank you. Other comments?
The only comment that I would have is I have supported going over the percentage, but it's been where there's been a very large lot or there has been perceived open space, and this backs up to a National Register district. So in support of the district, I think the changes that have been made to the house are wonderful, but it concerns me that we're giving any variance on something that backs up to a National Register district. Just a few of these lots do, but I think this is one of them.
Other comments? Just look at its square footage, and applying the 35%. The difference is 104 square feet. If it was at 35% versus what has been proposed. So just as you think about this motion. All right, are we ready to vote? All right, let's respond when I call your name. Motion to approve then. Kelly Baker,
Aye.
Susan Besser,
No.
Brian Laster,
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt,
Aye.
Mary Pierce,
No.
Kathy Worthington,
No.
Jim Roberts, aye. So it passes 4-3.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Hathaway.
Thank you, Mr. Hathaway.
Guys, appreciate it.
All right, we're on to number 2, consideration of signage at 99 Main Street. Ms. Rose.
Thank you. I am going to pull that item up before I get started. I do apologize for that. I had all these open and then misclicked something. Okay, so I will start by saying that there has been a slight change to the proposal since you received it, and I will introduce that accordingly. It's related to, specifically to the proposed window decal signage. The applicant is requesting a sign package for this building. This building is at 99 East Mead Street, and it is a new construction project. This is the first tenant that's requested signage at this particular building. And so I, in typical fashion, ask that the Historic Zoning Commission approve signage as it moves forward so we can make a determination and a rhythm of sign approvals for the mainstay of the building. The package includes a wall sign above the storefront and canopy with gooseneck fixtures proposed to mount above it. I'm going to go ahead and share a photograph of that. This storefront isn't rendered exactly the same way that it looks in real life, but you can see that I'll try to zoom out a little bit. The storefront wall sign is proposed to be over the canopy. There is a canopy that comes out from the building, expands the whole front facade, and this would be above that and underneath the second floor window sills. The applicant's also asking to install a projecting arm sign adjacent to the storefront. It would either be to the left of the storefront here or to the right underneath the canopy. That would be a pedestrian specific sign. And then the installation of a window decal sign. On the submittal that you received, there was a black backer for the window decal. And that backer was removed at staff suggestion so that the applicant may have a little bit more flexibility in how the lettering is used and how it's configured on the window itself. The applicant did take that into consideration, and I appreciate that. And so what you see is a little different than what you have in your packet. As for the wall sign, the guidelines would recommend that wall signs be placed in typical locations that are similar to that on adjacent neighboring buildings. The wall sign's proposed to be at this location and is rectangular in shape and proposed to be centered over the storefront entrance. So this is a wider storefront than some of the buildings or some of the tenant spaces in this building will have. And the applicant is proposing to put it centered right over the front entrance. The proposed location is very typical of neighboring buildings, but this storefront includes an approximate 1-inch brick projection that's vertical that bisects the upper facade between the two windows. I can pull up a photograph if that helps refresh your memory, but that is a 1-inch projection, and therefore it causes the sign placement to not be entirely consistent with the guidelines, as it would recommend against the placement of signage over any decorative detailing or any original decorative designs. And it also states that wall signs should be mounted to flat surfaces of the building. So what the applicant has proposed here is to use a metal backer and to have it placed flat on the brick that projects out, and then use spacer bars underneath about 1 inch thick to allow the sign to be stable and to be flush against this brick, but not necessarily flush against the brick on either side. The guidelines also state that materials should be consistent with what you would see historically, generally emulative of metal or wood. The backing is metal. The lettering is metal or acrylic. Acrylic would not be recommended by the guidelines, as it's a lesser historic emulative material. The metal would be appropriate. The color of the background is a dark gray, as you can see, and the lettering is a green. The proposed coloring is mostly consistent with the guidelines, though not entirely, as the recommendation is that the sign have a darker background than the lettering color, which is evident here, but that signs also complement the colors of the building. The green, it has, I believe, been adjusted slightly, perhaps from the branding green, but it's not entirely in keeping with the building brick itself. The wall sign measures 3.5 feet tall here within this quote unquote cornice area, and then another 16 feet 8 inches wide, which is not consistent with the guidelines. The guidelines would recommend that wall signs measure no more than 1 square foot per linear foot a width of the storefront. I went out and measured the storefront this morning. It's a beautiful morning to go out. It's super gorgeous right there by the river. And the storefront is a unique one in that it has, I measured from engaged column to engaged column. This space here between the two engaged columns is 24 feet and 10 inches in width. Then there's another space where the columns are, where the color of the brick is still the same as the rest of the storefront, because if you can recall, the building itself has slight color changes from storefront to storefront. If you were to count the area on either side where the color is still the same, that adds an additional 3.5 feet on each side. So with all that considered, the building facade would be about 32 feet wide. And because of that, the guidelines would recommend that the wall sign itself, in order to maintain a sense of scale with the facade, would measure no more than 32 square feet. This sign is proposed to measure about 58 square feet. The proposed lighting consists of gooseneck fixtures here, and those are consistent with the guidelines, as the guidelines would recommend that light fixtures be used to illuminate from top to bottom, essentially, and that they be unobtrusive. This is entirely appropriate with what you see on other buildings. This is consistent with the guidelines. There's also a projecting arm. The projecting arm is proposed to be underneath the canopy. I'm going to pull that one up right now and share that with you. Can everyone see the projecting arm? Okay, so it, similarly to the wall sign, is a dark gray with a green and white lettering. It is proposed to measure about 5 square feet in total sign surface. The guidelines would recommend that projecting arm signs not exceed 4.5 square feet. So this is slightly oversized as in compliance or in respect to the applicable guidelines. The sign's coloring is the same as the wall sign, which is mostly consistent with the guidelines. The sign would need to be placed in such a way that the bottom of the sign right here is mounted 8 feet above the grade surface, which in this case would be the sidewalk underneath the canopy. Because the proposal does not indicate specifically where this sign is proposed to go, it would need to be placed on either side, either to the left or the right, not above the storefront, and be 8 feet above. The window decal sign, I'm going to switch back over. Give me just a moment. I have it open and it's not showing that I can share it. There it is. The window decal is proposed to go here. The guidelines would recommend that window decals consist of a lighter lettering and that they not distract from the building facade or engross the window. This design is entirely appropriate. The ordinance under which this building project has been approved is the previous ordinance, which states that the window decal can measure up to 25% of the window glazing. And I believe this is sized to meet that. Of course, that's something they'll be asked to be considered at the sign permit stage. But please note, these notes under here are not part of the window decal. It's just this right here, and it appears to be entirely appropriate. With that, it is recommended that we have two different motions. One motion would be to deny issuance of the wall sign based on staff's comments that the sign placement does not entirely meet the intent of the guidelines. That would be something that would need to be considered by the commission, as this is a unique situation. If the commission determines that sign placement is appropriate, the applicant must confirm the storefront width. We believe that to be about 32 feet. So that we can determine the appropriate sign size based on the guidelines. And that size would need to be rescaled accordingly. So from what I've gathered, the 58 square feet sign would need to be reconfigured down to no more than 32 square feet. The application must meet all the other requirements of the Building Neighborhood Services Department prior to issuance of a sign permit, and any changes returned to staff or the commission for review prior to approval. As for the projecting arm and window decal signs, it would be recommended that the commission approve with conditions. The conditions being that the wall or the window decal sign as shown tonight be accepted, and that the projecting arm sign measure no more than 4.5 square feet, which would require a slight modification to meet the applicable guideline, and that be submitted to staff for review and approval prior to issuance of a sign permit. That the wall on which the projecting arm is considered be indicated to staff as well, and demonstrated that the sign face is measured a minimum of 8 feet from grade to meet certain code requirements. And that is all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Would the applicant wish to comment on this? Would the applicant please comment on this?
Jason, you're muted.
Sorry, would the
If
applicant
you hit the
please comment?
space bar, it might help.
I think I got it. I should be unmuted now.
He's still muted. We can't unmute him. There is a button
Jason?
at the bottom left you can click to
Yeah,
unmute yourself on the screen.
How about now?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so it sounds like we're all in agreement on the window decals. We have no issue with that. The as far as the projecting sign that's on the arm, no problem with achieving the minimum 8-foot height. We can easily cut. I think it's about 1.75 inches around the perimeter. Doesn't affect us at all, and get under at or below the 4.5 square feet. No problem there whatsoever. The real issue, I think, for discussion tonight is the wall sign, and there's a couple of factors going on here. I know we're the first tenant, so what we want to do is we have an interest in making sure that whatever precedent we set is easily adhered to by the rest. So we're the pioneer here. So what you've got is this. Look, I've built a ton of buildings. I get the brick accents and things like that on the facade. This projection it's an inch maybe at best, a protrusion, but it is the same brick color as on either side of it. And so what you have is the building that they built, that they got approval for, is it has a storefront that then was always intended to have signage above it. And so this brick accent, it's just there. And so if you put our signage on one side or the other of it, it's going to look a bit silly. So symmetry was the primary concern. And let's set aside the square footage of the signage. But we wanted it to look symmetrical. Obviously, if the brick outset was an accent color or something distinctively different, like Amanda, I just sent you an email with another one of our signage options. I don't know if you can throw that up on the screen, but it would be illustrative to show why we, in this other example, we had to pick one side or the other to go on. And so it's not like when this sign, there's a million ways we can skin the cat here with the sign installation. We could, in fact, go in, and the building owner is just fine if we went in and pulled the bricks that are protruding and made them flush and then just mounted everything flush. Or we don't even have to use, so this is the example that I sent where obviously you have columns or accents on either side. So this storefront area is definitively framed in. So there's no world where it would look okay sitting on top of this this peach color to the left of the sign. And so there's a way, if you can go back to do you have the rendering of our sign?
I do. I will pull that up for you.
Okay. So, there's a couple of ways that we could do this. Number one is the standoffs aren't ideal because just as a landlord myself, I understand that stuff gets behind it and you don't want that. We could thicken the backing of the sign on either side so that the backing is absolutely flush with the brick at all locations. And it would appear as though that brick outset simply terminates at the top of the sign. Okay, that seems to make sense to me. I can pull the brick and make them flush underneath, which I'm not sure that would not do the same thing. But I believe that our signage guy took a little bit of liberty here in this rendering simply to make the backing match where maybe there's different ways the bricks were laid or something like that. But the backing can adjust to whatever size it needs to be. The real thing is how to address, it doesn't exactly matter what the overall size of the sign is, so long as it fits under 32 square feet, no big deal. We're fine with that. We just don't want it to look silly being on one side or the other. So I think the real question is, how do we achieve placement of the sign in such a way that it looks right? Because this is not the only example of this particular building we're going to run in, or you guys are going to run into on a go-forward basis. So I'm kind of open to discussions, suggestions on how to do it. I just think it'll look silly if it's placed on one side or the other of this accent that's the same color as all the surrounding brick. So I do believe that if we thicken the backing of this that the sign sits on either side by basically about 3/4 of an inch, the whole sign can sit flush with all of the brick. It's not going to be a maintenance issue for birds' nests or anything to get behind it. And it will appear as though this accent brick does in fact terminate at the top of the sign. Now, I wouldn't be suggesting this if the outset brick accent was a different color, because then it would look silly. So I'm kind of open to whatever everybody's got to say.
Okay, well, we'll get into that. Are there any citizens who wish to comment on this application? And Commission, let's do this in two motions, one on the wall sign and then one on the projecting arm sign and the window decal. So is there a motion on the wall sign? And then we can discuss.
I'll move to approve the wall sign with staff comments.
All right, that's going against the staff recommendation, Mary.
On the wall.
Walls, on the
I
wall.
don't mean the wall sign. Excuse me, forget it.
Thank you.
I thought we were talking about the arm.
No. How about the wall? Is there a motion on the wall sign?
Well, I would move to disapprove it with
Okay,
staff
thank you.
comments.
I'll second.
All right, thank you, Lisa. All right, now comments. And let me just say at the outset, Mr. Ritson, I don't have any problem with the way you've got it positioned here. The problem is the size of the sign, the 58 square footage versus 32 square feet, assuming we're taking both of those vertical columns as part of your storefront, which I don't have any problem with. So I think the main thing is it needs to be reduced in size. That would be the best solution. The mounting is fine, and I agree with you. It doesn't need to go left or right. And I don't think you don't need to have any bricks removed. I think if you stub it off the wall an inch or 2 inches, then you've solved that problem. So other comments?
Mr. Chair, what the applicant said, that he's the first one, and this is a real nice new big building for downtown. So it would be my preference, and I have no problem with the solution that Chuck offered as far as the placement goes. Jason, excuse me, your dad. Excuse me, Jason. Anyway, I have no problem with that part of it, but this is I'm so sorry. This is a whole building that's going to have a sign on each of the businesses. And I think when you make the decision for this, when you're making a decision for all of them, I think it's worthy of coming to the next design review. So I would prefer that happen.
Okay, other comments?
Mr. Chair, if I recall, and it's been a while, I believe when we originally saw the plans for this building, this might have been 2 storefronts, not just one, that got combined to make a larger.
I remember there was one like this. I don't know if this is the one.
It may not be this one. So just.
I don't know. Is this the one, Amanda? Do you know?
I am not sure. I do know that this, the applicant has there's some demising walls that have changed on the interior. So this is a double storefront per se, but it does have one entrance, and it's it's the desire of the applicant just to center above that door, which would be typical otherwise.
That makes logical sense. It just flipping through the pictures, and of course I don't have the entire building facade in front of me, but it does look like we probably will not encounter this with every tenant, because there's 2 spaces, there's 2 storefronts in some of these sections. So I think we won't see this every time we have someone come through, but it is something to kind of keep in consideration. And then also reflecting back on some of our sign challenges with the building across the street, I think it sort of behooves us in the future to keep those signs in mind as we look at storefronts and think about approvals of infill buildings in the situation.
And Ms. Baker, I apologize. I understand what you were saying now. You are absolutely correct. This is one where it did have 2 entrances, and it was brought to the Historic Zoning Commission's attention by staff that the architect for the entire building, not this particular applicant tonight, wanted to combine those into one storefront. So you're absolutely correct that this won't be an issue on every storefront that moves forward. unless there is a request in the future by the building owner to combine storefronts.
So for that reason, I'm more comfortable with this solution, especially given that we've got brick colors that are, sort of mask it a little bit. But just something to keep in mind as we look at future buildings, I don't think we've necessarily considered sign placement as we've looked at buildings and the way that they're constructed and the facades. And so something just to keep in mind in the future.
Okay, other comments?
I have a comment.
Oh, go ahead.
Jason, I'd like to know, how does the awning affect the sign? Is it one large continuous awning that is mimicking the sign, or is it two, awnings that go over each bay?
No, ma'am, it's not a, when you say awning, this is a structural,
It's a flat panel, is it not?
I can help answer that. And for everyone's understanding, Ms. Worthington is new to the commission as of today. And so she did not have the background on this building that some other folks may have. It is a continual integrated brick canopy that comes over the sidewalk. And it's there because of considerations with how the building had to be constructed in light of the floodplain that a portion of the building is situated in. And so it is, the canopy is below where the applicant is proposing the sign, but just below it. And it extends the whole frontage of the building. Does that help?
The structural overhang, you can walk underneath. It hangs out about 7 or 8 feet. So it's not like a canvas awning attached to the building. Those are on the back of the building.
Thank you.
This is Lisa. I was wondering, this building has always reminded me of the one across from the factory on Liberty Pike. Mm-hmm. And I don't recall for any of those businesses that these kinds of signs are on the brick that way. I was wondering, is there any way to have the sign lowered so that it's not on the brick at all, so that it's on the overhang part of the building? But I think to Ms. Pierce's point, this may be appropriate for a deferral.
Do you want to make that motion?
Show the building really quickly, just so everyone can be familiar with that. I want to make sure that everyone understands. Mr. Ridson's explanation was a little better than mine. The canopy doesn't stick out as much as the upper story cantilevers to create a canopy. So the area that we're talking about is right here. Does that help? Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to make sure.
More or less a breezeway.
Correct.
Okay. Ms. Marquardt, did you want to make a motion to defer?
Yeah, I think because, and I understand that the applicants are kind of between a rock and a hard place here, but there may be options that we have not considered yet. And so I would make an amendment that this be deferred to design review.
You had to refer it to the next voting meeting, and they can come to design review.
Yes, exactly.
Or
Defer to the next voting meeting and come to design review so that we can consider some options.
All right, is there a second?
I will second.
All right, thank you, Mary. All right, we got a motion to defer, which overrides Mary's motion to deny. So, there any more conversation about that?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
this is Susan. I just want to iterate that I think if the applicant came back with a sign that was more in keeping with the square footage of our signs, that would really help, because the thing that's most apparent to me is that the proportions are really off with this sign. And I think that will really help us visualize what it could be. Thank you.
Good comment. Okay, if there's nothing else, then please respond. This is a motion to defer
Question.
this
How about-
part.
Quick question. Could I ask a quick question?
Yeah, quick.
What I'm hearing generally is that you want me to come back with the appropriate square footage, same layout as I described.
And you may come back with another layout. You may decide to do something different. Your sign designer needs to maybe have some other ideas. That's the purpose of design review.
Okay.
And yeah, you can come back with a different layout if you, a different size.
Just looking for some guidance, that's all.
I think what I'm hearing, and I don't want to overspeak for any of the commissioners, feel free to jump in if I've got the wrong take on this, but I think that some of the commissioners are having difficulty in getting past the sizing in order to determine the appropriateness of location. It sounds like the folks may be open to the location. It does seem like a more typical location, but if it were sized where it would be easier to visualize that, I think that it may be helpful to the members.
Well, Amanda, that's one thing. The other thing is the size of the building. The rest of the building and the other signs that would go there.
And other options that might be available, Mr. Chair.
Yes. So that's it. All right, then please respond when I call your name. Kelly Baker,
Aye.
Susan Besser,
Aye.
Sue Brown Laster,
Aye.
Mark Hart,
Aye.
Mary Pierce,
Aye.
Kathy Worthington,
Aye.
and Jim Roberts. Aye. All right, the next one is a motion for the wall sign and the projecting arm sign.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
just to clarify, that vote would have been on the amendment to the motion. So it would have amended the motion.
No, it's a motion to defer, which overrides the original.
It overrides? Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I think I'm right, legal counsel, wherever you are.
Let's double check.
Ms. Spencer, can you clarify, please?
Yes.
Okay, so a motion to defer supersedes any other motion on the table. Yes, thank you.
I remembered something from training. Okay, the next item then, or the next motion would be a motion for the projecting arm sign and the window decals. Is there such a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to approve with conditions a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed projecting arm and window decal signage.
Thank you, Kelly. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mary. Any discussion? Okay, if not, please respond when I call your name. Kelly Baker,
Aye.
Susan Besser,
Aye.
Brian Laster,
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt. Lisa Marquardt, you
Aye.
there?
Mm-hmm.
Kathy Worthington
Aye.
and Jim Roberts. Aye, that's unanimous. Huh? All right, we're on to the next item then.
I'm sorry,
Consideration-
what was that? Did you?
Let's not ask my vote.
I didn't,
I thought you did. I'm sorry. What is your vote?
yeah,
Okay.
sorry, I thought I did. Okay, we've got,
Mr. Chair, this is Mary Cruz Fincher. Sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to make sure that the motion to defer was to a specific date.
yeah, February.
It was to the February.
HC historic zoning.
Yes,
Okay.
and I wanted to clarify for the applicant on the line that the recommendation from the motion that was made is that the item go to Design Review Committee next Tuesday at 4:00. I am more than happy to add that item to the agenda if that's something that you and Renee would like to do. I will send you the information about that tomorrow. It will be a discussion meeting where we can talk about different options, but the voting would have to take place in February based on the motion that was made tonight.
Okay, yes, please add us to that. That's where we get the guidance.
All right, thank you so very much.
Okay, now we're ready for item 3, which is Consideration of ramp construction, alterations, parking driveway, and HVAC placement and fencing at 128 4th Avenue North.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Ms. Gibson.
I'm going to share my screen quickly. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
The applicant is requesting a certificate of appropriateness for a series of work at 128 4th Avenue North as follows. Construction of an ADA accessibility ramp, alterations to the existing parking area and driveway, construction of fencing located here and here, and HVAC placement. Proposals related to these items, to this item, appeared before the Design Review Committee at its March 16th and May 18th, 2020 meetings. The chair would like to first consider the ramp, HVAC placement, and parking and driveway configuration, and then move on to the fencing.
And Ms. Gibson, if I could interject, can you clarify just quickly the difference between this item and item number 4 moving forward?
Sure. So item number 4 is the same property, and the application was all of the alterations proposed for the current item 3, along with in addition to the principal structure. So staff has broken them up into 2 different items so that only the addition will be considered for item 4. The proposed accessibility ramp is located on the rear elevation of the house. The ramp is composed of wood and is designed to include wood or metal balusters and painted wood lattice. The guidelines recommend ramps be composed of wood and placed on rear or secondary elevations. The guidelines also recommend that ramps be designed to be reversible and have a minimal impact on historic features, and that detailing be similar to that found on the historic building. Wood balusters should be selected for consistency with the guidelines. The location, design, and detailing of the proposed ramp are consistent with the guidelines. The HVAC pad located here will be located on the rear elevation of the house between the building here and the ramp here. The ramp provides screening to the HVAC units. The guidelines recommend that utilities be placed and screened in order to minimize their impact on the district, and recommend the use of placement, landscape, and or fencing to hide trash or utility units. The proposed HVAC placement is consistent with the guidelines. The guidelines recommend that driveways follow historic patterns, be located along rear or side elevations, and should be landscaped to mitigate impact on the district's historic character. Driveways and parking configurations are required to meet the standards set forth by the zoning ordinance. The proposed concrete parking area, seen here, is located on the side of the building, but behind the facade of the home. Landscaping will provide screening to mitigate the impact to the district. The proposed parking and driveway alterations are consistent with the guidelines. So for the ramp construction, HVAC placement, and parking and driveway alterations, it is recommended that the commission approve with conditions the proposed alterations as follows. Wood balusters should be selected for the ramp for consistency with the guidelines, and the application must meet all of the requirements of the Building and Neighborhood Services Department, including but not limited to meeting minimum parking requirements. Any additional changes to the approved plans must be returned to the commission for review and approval. Additionally, staff has listed some information in the staff report for the applicant to consider before applying for permits. Thank you.
Would the applicant like to comment on this application? And this is just the parking, driveway, and HVAC placement.
So is it my understanding that we're going to talk about the fence in item number 4?
No, we're going to talk about it as a part of item 3, but
Okay.
after
So-
these first two pieces.
Okay. So no, I don't have any additional comments on the first 2 pieces.
Okay. Then with that in mind, are there any citizens who wish to comment on this application? Hearing none, then I'd like a motion relative to the parking, driveway, and HVAC placement.
I'll make a motion. This is Lisa.
Okay.
That a COA be approved for the ramp construction, HVAC placement, and parking and driveway alterations.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Is there a second to that?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank
This
you,
is Susan.
Susan. All right, a discussion, questions?
The question I had, Mr. Chair, is when in part of this application, it said that it may not meet the parking requirement. So I'm confused if they're saying that on the front end, how we approve it. I'm just a little confused about how that goes.
That's relative to discussion before any addition. Is that correct? So that the parking, we're voting on everything before any consideration of an addition.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, hearing done then. Then please respond and call your name. Kelly Baker,
Aye.
Susan Besser,
Aye.
Brian Laster,
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt,
Aye.
Mary Pierce,
Aye.
Kathy Worthington,
Aye.
Jim Roberts, aye. All right, now we're ready for the discussion on fencing. Kelly Gibson, back
Thank
to you.
Sure. One moment. Can everyone see my screen again?
Yes.
Great. The proposal includes the replacement of existing wood fencing along the western property line, seen here, and the construction of aluminum primary yard fencing, seen here and here. The proposed wood fencing is 6 feet in height and extends along the side yard of the property and into the primary yard. As proposed, the fencing is not consistent with the guidelines, which recommend that wooden plank fencing be recessed at least 20 feet from the plane of the residence's primary facade, and fence height should not exceed 3 feet in the primary yard. Fencing style specifications were not included in the application and will be required in order for staff to fully review that request. The proposed aluminum fencing with brick piers extends across the primary yard of the property here and ties into a sliding gate of the same style and materials located at the entrance to the parking area on the side of the house here. The proposed fencing is consistent with the guidelines for height, 3 feet, but not for style. The guidelines recommend against the use of aluminum fencing in primary yards and instead recommend the use of wooden picket fencing, as wooden picket fencing is the most common fencing material for primary yards. Other appropriate fencing materials include open weave brick or cast iron designs. As the property is a vernacular frame house, a wooden picket fence would be most compatible with the surface materials of the building. The guidelines also recommend against the use of sliding gates, stating that front yard entrances should not have sliding gates. Sliding gates should be avoided in general, and operable gates should be configured to swing inwardly and not open onto public sidewalks. It is recommended that the commission deny the proposed fencing with the following. If issued a COA, the application must meet all the requirements of the Building and Neighborhood Services Department. Any additional changes to the approved plans must be returned to the commission for review and approval, as primary yard fencing is not eligible for administrative approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to comment on the fencing?
Yes, we would like to discuss it a little bit. So starting with the side yard fencing, the one that's on the left side of the property between that and the house next door or the building next door, there is a fence there. So the intent was just to replace in kind. We're not extending it or really changing it any way other than it's just deteriorated to the point where it's no longer viable and is a hazard on the property. So does that play into your interpretation or consideration of that would be our first question there.
Mr. McCray, could you please indicate where that existing fence terminates on the property?
Currently, or it terminates at the end of the furthest down parking space. So
okay,
right about here. This is this dashed line.
I see. Okay.
Following the arrow. Goes from the
Typically,
rear
when fences are removed, they're requested to be placed back in keeping with the intent of the guidelines.
That's fine.
Mr. McCray, do you have any picture of that existing fence?
There's not a great picture. I think it can be seen a little bit in the Google Earth Street View or Google Maps Street View, but I do not have one that offhand that I can provide. See if I can find.
We can try to pull that up if you'd like, Mr. Chair. We didn't have a lot of luck in showing that through Street View, or we would have.
I also have another question related to that, and this goes back between kind of the different things that are required in the zoning ordinances and the downtown historic guidelines. When it talks about fencing and buffer zones for parking in the zoning ordinance, it requires that there be a buffer all the way that basically covers every single parking space that's added. So our interpretation would be that it's required from the rear, this furthest back parking space all the way up to the front, between 3 to 6 feet. So if the fence was at a shorter height within those guidelines, would that change the conversation?
Ms. Gibson, would you like to speak to that, or would you like me to?
You're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. If you wouldn't mind speaking to that, that's fine.
Sure. The guidelines do recommend that there is a 3-foot height anywhere between 20 feet behind the front facade, which in this case would actually be in line with the right side of the porch in forward. So to Mr. McCurry's question, the height that he's mentioned would be appropriate, but the style of the fence as a privacy fence would still be inappropriate in light of guidelines which say that primary yard fences shouldn't be of a privacy style. To speak specifically to his point about buffering, which is a valid point, there could be landscaping used in lieu of fencing in that 20-foot area if so necessitated in order to screen any sort of proposed parking there. Does that answer your question, Mr. McCurry?
I believe it does.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, is that all you've got on the side yard fencing? Would you like to talk about the front yard?
I would like to talk about the front yard fencing. I think we don't have any major objection to different style of fence. The commission or the planning commission or planning staff's recommendation of a wood fence instead of a metal fence seems to make sense. As long as so if we could use, I guess, will we need to come back before the commission with a different fence design to go forward, or could there be is that something that staff can approve based on set design standards for wooden fences in front yards?
So staff is not able to approve primary yard fencing administratively. That would have to come back before the commission.
And then question on the sliding gate. I know that kind of is a hang up for a lot of things because that's looked on poorly. And I think usually they're done very poorly. But I think the intent here was that the sliding gate would be something that would be open during business hours and only closed after hours for this property. And the appearance of the gate would be that of any other regular kind of double swinging gate. So if you look at the elevation on that last page, the intent would be to make it look like it's two separate panels that are just closed. And so the only time that you would know that it's a sliding gate is when it's in operation. Otherwise, it would be screened by the landscaping on the left side of the entry drive. So with that information, does that cause any different, I guess, thoughts within the commission?
Well, we'll see. Is that all you had, Mr. McCreary?
Yes, sir.
Okay, are there any citizens who wish to comment on this portion of the application? Hearing none, then we need a motion on the fencing.
Mr. Chair, this is Brian. I move to deny a COA for the proposed fencing based on staff analysis and recommendation.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second that. This is Susan.
Thank you, Susan. All right, discussion. Anybody want discussion?
Yeah, this is Lisa. I'd like to hear from the applicant in a little bit more detail about the fencing as being an in-kind replacement. Is it or isn't it? I'm not clear on that.
There is a fence there along the property line on the left side. So
Right.
we would be just replacing that fence. I think it's about a 6-foot high fence that's there already. So we would be replacing that.
And Mr. Chair, I think that's been replaced over the years and was probably, as I remember, put there before there was even historic zoning. It keeps being fixed. So I would recommend that this be deferred to the next historic zoning meeting. I would make that motion.
Okay, and is that for both the side and the front? Yes, okay. All right, then we've got a motion to defer by Ms. Pierce to the next historic zoning meeting in February. Is there a second to that motion?
Mr. Chair, I'll second that.
All right, any other conversation about that? And I think that would be, when that comes, we need to see some pictures of that. And
Well, I
probably-
think this would give an opportunity to get feedback and have an open discussion at design review. I would
Yes.
like to see it put on that agenda.
Very good. Very good. Any other comments on this? Then we have we're ready to vote then on a motion to defer the fencing portion of this. So please respond when I call your name. Kelly Baker,
Aye.
Susan Besser,
Aye.
Brian Laster,
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt,
Aye.
Mary Pierce,
Aye.
Kathy Worthington,
Aye.
and Jim Roberts. Aye. Thank you. That's good. Okay, we're on to item 4 now, which is a consideration of the addition at this same address, 128 4th Avenue North. Kelly Gibson again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. One moment. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Great. The applicant is requesting a certificate of appropriateness for an enclosed addition to the principal building at 128 4th Avenue North. This review pertains only to the proposed enclosed addition. Staff separated this application from the additional alterations in item 3 because the proposed addition does not appear to meet the zoning requirements for parking. Proposals related to the item appeared before the DRC at its March 16th and May 18th, 2020 meetings. The guidelines support the placement of additions on rear or obscured elevations with limited visibility. The proposed addition is located on the side and rear elevations of the house. Designed at a 1 1/2 story scale, the addition roof ridge height matches that of the front-facing gable. So here you can see the existing historic house and the area with the addition. The portion of the addition located on the side elevation of the building is recessed from the plane of the building facade behind the side elevation porch. So here you can see the primary facade of the building. Well, existing is at the bottom here. You can see the primary facade of the building. And then you can see the location of the proposed addition. So it's located on the rear as well as the side elevation of the building, but recessed behind the porch located on the side elevation. The guidelines recommend that additions be designed to be clearly contemporary and compatible with the proportions, form, materials, and details of the building, and be limited to no more than half of the footprint of the original building. The historic building must be clearly identifiable, and approaches that unify the existing structure and new construction into a single architectural whole should be avoided. The proposed addition is differentiated from the historic structure through the use of insets and some material changes, in this case, the foundation. The proposed roof material and siding will match the existing structure. TPO membrane roofing will be placed on a small flat portion of the existing roof. So now we're looking at the rear elevation. The proposal includes a gable and gabled dormers on the rear elevation of the house. The window located within the gable, seen here, gives the appearance of a half story. The window should be removed to lessen the perceived scale of the addition, since the historic structure is a single story. The dormers are located and scaled appropriately. For compatibility with historic equivalents, the dormers should be set back 2 feet from the exterior facade wall. The window located on the side of the dormer, seen here, should be removed, as this is not a typical location for windows. The proposed addition skylights, seen here, appear to be consistent with the guidelines, which recommend that skylights be installed in locations not visible from the street. The footprint of the proposed addition measures 1,106 square feet, or approximately 38% of the existing structure. The addition size is consistent with the guidelines, which recommend that additions be limited to no more than half of the footprint of the original building. The original building is defined to include all the portions of the building that are 50 years old or older. The proposed building coverage, 29%, is also consistent with the guidelines. The proposed smooth, hardy lap siding with a 4-inch reveal and the proposed foundation material, which is CMU with parge coat, are consistent with the guidelines. TPO membrane and asphalt shingle roofing is also consistent with the guidelines. The proposed windows are composed of wood and appear to have historic dimensions and profile. The proposed style of trim boards is appropriate in light of the guidelines, but the K-style metal gutters should be half round or round for consistency with the guidelines. One moment. One moment. Here's some additional 3D drawings showing the perspectives from the front and front right. So here is straight on to the primary elevation of the home, and you can see the addition here. And this is from the perspective from the front right, with the addition shown here and the existing shown here. Based on updated information from the applicant, the proposed addition's square footage as shown on the plans would require 12 and not 14 parking spaces. These submitted plans do not appear to reflect this requirement. Parking requirements will be reviewed by the Building and Neighborhood Services Department in the building permit phase. And I believe staff had one additional comment on the dormers. One moment. Amanda, did you have a comment?
Sure, I'm happy to speak to that. The dormers on the rear are an appropriate location. This is a unique situation in which the existing addition on the rear has a very flat roof. Not entirely flat, but it is very flat, and the applicant's proposing to take advantage of that flatness in order to add some upper story space to the building. Ms. Gibson, if you could turn, please, perhaps to a side angle where I'm seeing the, yes. That rendering right there is perfect, thank you. You can see on the rear, if Ms. Gibson can point out the dormers I'm speaking to, it is one dormer. It is shaped to appear as two gabled dormers in a way, in order to help keep that slope down. It also has a window on the side, which is a bit atypical. So it would be the recommendation of staff to remove that window to be more consistent with dormer treatments throughout the historic district. But if at all possible as well, and I'm not sure it quite is, to perhaps reconfigure the appearance of the two gabled dormers that are really one dormer, to have a shared roof slope, and so it appears to not have gables at all, perhaps just be a shed dormer, because they are the applicant's trying to keep a semblance of the roof shape you see adjacent to it, and to keep the slope down so it doesn't pop up above the existing roof line. But I do think a shed would be appropriate there so that it doesn't appear to be two gable dormers that are situated very close together. Thank you.
It is recommended that the commission approve with conditions the proposed addition as follows. The windows must have historic profiles and dimensions and consist of either wood or a composite material with the appearance of wood. The window specifications must be approved by the preservation planner or the commission prior to issuance of a building permit. The dormers must be set back 2 feet from the exterior facade wall for compatibility with historic equivalents. The K-style metal gutters should be half round or round for consistency with the guidelines. And the application must meet all the requirements of the Building and Neighborhood Services Department, including but not limited to the minimum parking requirements for the addition prior to issuance of a building permit. Any additional changes to the approved plans must be returned to the commission for review and approval. Staff has listed some information for the applicant to consider before applying for permits. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McCurry, would you like to comment?
Yes, I would. Thank you. So we've been before the DRC for this project previously a couple months ago, and so I appreciate your time again for looking at it. I wanted to just go through the project briefly and talk about the changes that we've made since that DRC meeting. I think we had come with some more gabled roofs at that point and things like that. So the new design has taken in the comments from the DRC in providing an addition that is much more in scale and also in style that's comparable, or I guess or works well with the existing building. We also wanted to make sure that we made the additions small enough so that you wouldn't really see them from any other elevations. We added The dormers on the rear are set back, and we had previously provided, I think, a shed roof in the designs that were submitted to the DRC, and that received some resistance in a previous edition, so that's why they're gables now. Also, the gutters that are on the existing building are K-style right now, so switching to half rounds on the new addition may be inconsistent between the two and incongruent. So that's something that we would like you all to consider. And then speaking of the windows at the rear, the property is pretty well screened on all sides. This addition is really hard to see, and especially on the back, there's a fairly large tree line separating this property from the adjacent property behind it. And so we'd like your consideration on the two windows, the one that's the window in the rear, the larger gable end, because these are office spaces, and it's pretty difficult to have an office space without a window. It's not a very fun place to be. So we'd like your consideration on these windows because they aren't visible from really other elevations and they're hidden back on the back. It's also the one on the side of the two gable dormers. They're, I think, sheet, if you can go to sheet, it's HZC09. So on that sheet, you can see kind of on the left, there's a little bit of that window that you see, but for the most part, that is screened from view as well. Really, the only time you would see it is if you were on the property looking at on the property in the back corner looking up at the house. So again, that's an office space that would have no windows in it at all without for that window right there. So we request your consideration on that one. And I think those are really the main things that we wanted to kind of talk about before you all discuss it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any citizens which comment on this application? Hearing none, then we need a motion on the addition. From someone. Don't everybody speak at once. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, this is Brian. I'd like to move that we defer to the next voting meeting of the Historic Zoning Commission.
All right, and talk about your reason for deferral on this one.
And also to invite the applicant back to the DRC. I think there are a lot of issues dealing with the dormers, the shed dormer, the gutters, the scale and proportion, and the massing of the addition to the original. And I think further discussion is warranted.
All right. Is there a second to that?
I'll second that. This is Susan.
Okay. Do you have any, Susan, do you have any other comments on this?
I tend to agree with Mr. Laster. I think when you start putting an addition to the side of a building, it's more difficult, more challenging. And there are a lot of things going on with roof lines and that sort of thing. And I'm not comfortable with the project as it is right now. Thank you.
Can I ask a question, Mr. Commissioner?
Sure.
So speaking of that, if we look at the property as a whole, also, I think it's important to consider that this is a fairly wide piece of property. There's a large bit of yard to the right side of the property where the addition is going, which seems to be a logical place for an addition, also given that it's fairly narrow. And if you look at the property as it exists today, there's a lot going on that roof line in the back already. And we actually think that we're kind of simplifying it a little bit. We've also, if you look at the 3D elevations, some of these ones that are axons are a little bit misleading. I think they make the addition look larger than it is, but the ones that are kind of street views, so that would be pages HCC 12, right? I think that shows pretty well, really more of how the addition does not seem as big as it looks on the previous pages, right? especially from the street, which is perspective front entry, the top one on the sheet. You really can't see, I mean, the addition does not overwhelm the existing property. And also on HCC 03, you can kind of see more, a lot of the mass of the addition is also around the back, right? It's an L shape around the kind of rear right corner of the property.
All right, would it help the commission if the applicant provided some photographs that had some markings out there as to where the overall addition would fall? Would that help this commission when they come to design review, assuming we defer this?
Absolutely. This is Lisa.
Are there others who want to respond to that?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that would be very helpful. And, just of note, just seeing this, and this is from the HCZ06, which does show a 2D from the front. Now, I know sometimes it's challenging on the 3D versions as well, but it almost looks like the addition to the right is almost as large as the house is to the left, considering where the porch ends. And I think we need some discussion about that type of scaling for a historic property of this nature.
Mr. Chair, the other thing that was confusing to me, which I said earlier, when the staff's saying this, that they don't show enough parking, and then we're approving the addition, and I don't understand if the cart's before the horse or how you do that, because if both things have to happen, if you have to have an addition and you have to have a certain amount of parking for it, I'd love some more information on that. Thank you.
Okay, and you understand that it's been revised from the 14 to the 12, right?
And do they achieve the 12 now?
I can speak to that. I'm happy to speak to that. Right now, the parking does not show 12, but parking requirements can be achieved off-site. That is something that would allow the applicant to meet the requirements of the zoning ordinance without altering what has been approved by the commission in terms of site configuration. So if the applicant chooses to move forward with modifying what was approved by the commission tonight in terms of parking, they can certainly bring that forward, but there are ways to achieve the requirements of the ordinance without doing so.
Okay, are there any other comments relative to before we vote on the deferral?
Mr. Chair, this is Susan.
Yeah.
I just have one more comment. From the 2D elevation, from the elevation, even I realize that the addition is set back, but it's coming across as a duplex. And I think that it's important to have this still read as a single dwelling, even though it is obviously for commercial use. And I think that's what I'm having some concerns about. Thank you.
Which drawing are you talking about?
Let's see. It was the one that was just, I guess, HCZ 06.
06.
So if you look at that drawing, it almost looks as if it's a duplex, and the addition is.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's my concern. Thank you.
Ms. Besser, is just to provide some information to the applicant, is that because there is a door underneath the side porch that would appear as a second entrance, and then there's the door on the main porch?
It's part of it, Ms. Rose, but I think that if the addition weren't didn't come out as far, that I think that it would be less so. Because right now it almost looks like that the gable front is almost in the center, and then you have these two, again, it just comes across as a duplex to me.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jason, how far back does this addition sit on the property from the front of the existing structure?
So it sits 33, almost 33 and a half feet back. If you see that on HZC 03.
Okay, I was looking at 01. Okay, I got you. Okay.
Yeah, so the addition is less than half the width of the existing structure on the front. And that door is existing, the one that is on the right side of the front gable. That is an existing door into the property.
And that's the porch that runs long way on the side of the house, really, right?
Yes, sir. That's right.
But I think looking at HZC 06, to further what Ms. Besser says, it looks like that is a very large addition on there. It's perception more than probably reality, but I think that's I think that's her concern. Would that be correct, Ms. Besser?
That would be correct. Thank you.
Those 2D elevations are always hard because
They are, no question. And that's what we got to deal. That's what causes some trouble a lot of times for us. It's not just this one.
Yep. So HCC 012 or HCC 12, the top elevation rendering doesn't help that perspective for you all.
No, I don't think it does.
I will say, as a designer, perspectives can be deceptive as well, and so that, that doesn't necessarily help me, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure.
Jason, this is Brian again. So looking at HCC 03, so you're saying that the length of the addition on the front is almost 20 feet. Let's just round it up to 20. And then from the gable to the end of the porch is about 40.
Yes.
So you could almost divide that into 3. To speak to Mrs. Besser's point.
Saying that it looks too symmetrical, too large.
That's my initial perspective, the way I see it when I first look at that drawing. I know this house, it's unique in Franklin. I think it's a very special property. And I'm thinking a little extra time to really think it through, I think could have some very positive effects.
All right, are there any other discussion on things for Mr. Ritson and Mr. McCreary to think about before we vote on this? We have a motion to defer then.
Just a reminder, if I could interrupt, just a reminder for photographs, please.
Yes, I think he's got that from all angles in and around that property. Any other comments from the commission?
Jim, do I understand that they're going to do some kind of marking that we could just?
That's what, photographs and markings. I think that's what we've talked about. It would be wonderful to be able to do site visits as we have done, but that's not permitted under our current COVID restrictions. So, anyway, so I think the photographs with your markings showing on there will be of help. I hope it will. All right, we have a motion to defer then to the February historic zoning meeting, and then the applicant can come to design review next Monday, if they so choose. Kelly Baker.
Aye.
Susan Besser.
Aye.
Brian Laster.
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt.
Aye.
Mary Pierce.
Aye.
Kathy Worthington.
Aye.
Jim Roberts, aye. Okay, thank you. We are now on to our next item, which is consideration of additions and alterations, breezeway enclosure, removal of window bays and modification of roof lines, opening on non-historic additions, shutter and garage door replacement, select window replacement at 402 Bridge Street. Ms. Rose.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate you reading all that. It's very important to staff that the agenda that's published is very clear to the public what is being achieved. But unfortunately for you, I've tried to clean some of that up a little bit in your motion, so you're not voting on each of those individually. The applicant, as you noted, is proposing a number of changes to the property at 402 Bridge Street. The subject property is a corner lot, and it features an 1830s historic structure, and that portion fronts Bridge Street. The historic structure also features a 1900, circa 1900 addition as well as one from 1981, both of which are designed as wings off the rear elevation and are massed toward 4th Avenue North. And I'm going to pull up a really cool tool that our awesome IT department just provided to planning staff. So you can see on the screen here, this is the original 1830s federal style structure. There is a circa 1900 addition winged off the back here. And then since that point, 1981, the owner added this addition that is mainly massed toward Bridge Street. So the scope of work includes the construction of a second story floor, which is primarily proposed to be placed on top of the portion of the building here. It also includes the modification of the existing garage size to add a bit more square footage by changing the depth about 2 feet. The alteration of the roof lines on this 1981 addition, and I'm going to turn it around so you can see that just a little bit better. You can see that there's a breezeway here, there's some window bays, so the proposal will make some amendments to those, as you'll see shortly. The alteration of some windows through the replacement of some non-historic windows throughout the structure, and the replacement of the garage door, which is oriented toward the back of the property, as well as the replacement of all the shutters throughout the structure. The applicant did appear before the DRC committee DRC to discuss this proposal in November and again in December last year. I have to say, as an aside, I usually have a difficult time changing the year date. When it's January, you keep wanting to write the same date from the previous year. This year is not that case. I never write 2020 instead of 2021. All right, so I'm going to switch screen to show you the plan set. Here's some more photographs to help show the property. I'm going to start with additions. So the upper level addition ties into this 1830s mass, and you can see it better here. Ties into the 1830s mass. You can see in this pinkish area on the second floor where that is proposed to go. It creates a T shape in doing so with the original historic form. The ridge aligns with that of the historic portion. And since this is a corner lot, the proposed addition is highly visible, which is not entirely keeping with the recommendations of the guidelines. It is, however, situated onto an existing addition, of course, that is also very highly visible. And because of this, the DRC expressed some concern about the proposal's overall massing. The applicant has revised the proposal to address those issues. The applicant has incorporated some recommendations from the DRC by lessening the overall proposed square footage of the upper floor by recessing its mass away from this front corner, which leaves the 1830 structure more fully exposed at the rear in the corner advantages. I'm going to switch angles so you can see that a little better. So this is an existing, and here is the proposed. As previously brought forward, the upper story actually covered up this second window. Now you can see it keeps these two windows exposed, and so you can really experience the scale and the mass of the original structure. The circa 1900 structure up to the addition to the structure is back here, this line, and the applicant has adjusted it more toward that. However, that addition's not so readily visible from vantages that you see here from 4th Avenue or even from Bridge Street. But the applicant has tried to design the structure so that you can see this circa 1900 addition still exposed. It's still brick. It does have a bit of relief here, so you can see that structure exposed, and the upper story is proposed as siding, so you can really read the way that the building has grown over time. The materials of the addition are wood siding and trim, wood windows, a brick chimney that you see here, and asphalt shingles, all of which are consistent with the guidelines. Again, the use of K-style gutters would not be recommended for the addition. I'd love for the applicant to clarify the type of shutter that is currently on the building, but the guidelines would recommend that half round be more appropriate to the age and style of the federal home. And additions, although not of the age of the historic home, of course, would need to have the detailing comparable to that. The garage door, or the garage addition, located here, really is extending the garage depth. And when I say depth, it's the depth from how the car pulls in, which is from the side. So it's expanding the depth of about 2 feet in order to better accommodate vehicles. As a non-historic addition, that alteration may be appropriate. And it kind of falls into a discussion about the overall massing and alterations to the massing. The proposal to alter roof lines on this 1981 addition is appropriate, specifically here through the enclosure of the breezeway portion right here, through the relocation of a wall, which used to be right through here and pushed back slightly to address the massing of this portion of the structure. The removal of the window bays, one was here, one was also over here. And to add windows here in lieu of a window bay, and then also move the fenestration pattern slightly on this side to align with what is desired on the upper level here. All of this, again, is non-historic, and so alterations to such could be appropriate if it met the recommendations of the remainder of the guidelines. As you can see collectively, the proposed alterations to the massing of the existing addition at that lower level render a more simplified, cohesive look that supports the simple detailing of a federal style home, which is seen here, and to help provide a cohesive look while still portraying the corner and highlighting this historic portion, as well as the historic addition on the back side as more visible from Bridge Street vantage point. The guidelines would recommend that one preserve and maintain historic windows. It is the intent of the applicant to maintain all historic windows and to repair those as needed. The replacement of windows that are not historic would be appropriate, and those windows must have historic profile and dimension. The replacement of the windows, just to comment a little further, would be appropriate, especially because many of the windows that are non-historic on the building are what we call GBGs, or grills between the glass, which do not have profile and dimensions. So the applicant's asking to make an alteration that would put the existing addition in better keeping with the intent of the guidelines. Replacement shutters are recommended to be wood and operable per guidelines as well. The replacement of the garage door is appropriate. There has not been specifications to demonstrate how that would look per se, but the guidelines would recommend that a door style similar to a historic equivalent, like a carriage style door, be used. And to speak a little more to the windows, I recognize here that the profile is a 1/1. that could be appropriate. However, because this is so obviously an addition, it could be appropriate as well to use a light pattern that's more in keeping with the federal style residence. Usually when we have window pattern considerations, it's to help differentiate a form from the historic form so that the historic form reads as such, and it's clear that the addition is in fact an addition. I think based on this being a corner lot and being an existing addition that's rather expansive, it would actually be more cohesive and more appropriate in this case to use a light pattern that would be more complementary to the federal form, which would be a multi-light, or in this case, a 4/4. With that, it is recommended that the commission approve the proposal in its entirety with the following considerations: that the applicant utilize a half-round gutter in lieu of a OG or K-style gutter, as it is a federal style home and the addition is high visibility from the street view. That all the windows for replacement and for the addition areas must have historic profile and dimension and consist of either wood or a composite material with the appearance of wood, and that those specifications be submitted to staff for review and approval prior to issuance of a permit. The garage door specifications, as well as that of the shutters, must also be approved by staff or the commission prior to issuance of a permit, and that the existing lap reveal or be matched on the addition, or otherwise a lap reveal of a historically appropriate profile, which would be 4 to 5 inches with a smooth face siding, be utilized for the addition, and if needed for the entirety of the structure at the rear, where it is non-historic, and if it's desired by the applicant to reclad it all to be consistent. Otherwise, the application must meet all the requirements of the BNS department, and any changes to such must be returned to either the preservation planner or the commission for review and approval. Thank you.
Ms. Rose? Thank you.
Would the applicant wish to comment?
Hello, wait, oh, is it my turn? I'm sorry, it broke up for a minute. Okay, hey guys, I'm back. So,
Great.
After our last design review committee meeting, we just kind of went back and gathered our thoughts and looked at this building holistically. I think the biggest challenge is of this is we've got multiple facades on that 4th Avenue side. There's a lot of in and out from the 1980s edition. And I think we were trying to keep a portion of that as just saying this is the 1981s and then we're going to do a new addition to the side. I think the problem with that from our discussions we've had is the scale was still off and odd, and I don't disagree with those comments we had in the design review committee meeting. So we gathered together as a team. The team on this project is phenomenal. It's an incredible builder. They want to do it right by the building. They want to do it right historically. We definitely have every intentions of fully restoring the front portion of the historic home with the windows and the trim and repointing the brick. As far as the addition goes, I think the biggest problem was we've had discussions about box bays and all these things. And I think at the end of the day, it's because they weren't appropriate. And so instead of trying to work with the box bays, let's just take them off. And then also thinking through, I've done a lot of historic work in Virginia, which has a lot more federal infrastructure than you see here. And oftentimes the additions are 2 stories on the rear of federal buildings. And I think part of the problem is because that 1980s had a lot of movement, it just wasn't working out right. So what we're proposing to do is make the addition smaller than you've seen before. So we do see 2 full window bays. So at this point in time, the only window that we will be missing from the historic is the one that has been replaced and is not the historic window, the one in the middle of the 2nd floor. And then the other part that was really important to me is that we line up the 2nd floor addition with the 1980s addition on the 1st floor. And we did that to begin with, but I think that made the addition too big. So instead of trying to align the new addition to the 1980s addition, let's make that 1980s addition shorter. So we've moved that side wall where that breezeway is towards the historic house 5 feet. And so then that way, when we're stacking the new addition on top of the 1980s addition, that scale is appropriate for a federal style house. And so taking that off, and I think the other part when you see on this drawing is I've always struggled with that garage and that double gable, and it's so tall and so prominent. Let's just strip all that down and make it more simplified. And so in the thought process here is just again moving that back and getting it better in scale to tell the story of today's time, what has been done to it over time, but also to get it right in scale. And we feel like we've done that well with this proposal. I definitely understand the concern about the half-round gutters. I'm a huge fan of half-round gutters. I think the front historic portion is actually a Queen Anne because the gutter's coming through the downspouts currently coming through the middle of the soffit. And so this would just apply to the addition. The one thing I do like about a K style on a federal style house like this is that the profile of a larger K, not the small K, but a 5 or 6 inch K, gives a little bit of decor to the fascia board as it runs around, but definitely open to whatever you all feel is appropriate from a gutter standpoint. We had intended of doing round gutters, round downspouts, regardless of the style of gutter, so that's not a problem. I do know that we've had discussions about the windows. Should they be 1/1? Should they be 2/2 as appropriate in scale with what's on the side? Again, the existing windows that are there are girls between glass, and they're not appropriate. We plan on replacing them all anyway with wood windows. And we also want to make sure that the addition is also wood siding. So we're not looking for hardy board here. We want to be as authentic as possible and continue to tell the story of this home for many years to come.
Okay. That's great. Thank you. Anything else, Amanda?
That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. Are there any citizens which comment on this application?
I did want to note for the record that the current owner of the property, Ms. Julie Fisher, did submit an email to, the applicant submitted an email to staff on behalf of the owner, Julie Fisher, and that was disseminated to the commission to consider in light of the application. The gist of the email was seeking approval for the proposal and noting that in cases like this one, that having a more cohesive approach may be appropriate, more or less, in the gist of the email. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, commission, we need a motion to start discussion on this.
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chair.
Excuse me. Go ahead. We had
Well,
two
I think
comments.
Brian and I both were chiming in there.
Okay.
Go ahead,
Susan, you go ahead.
Okay. I move to approve with conditions a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed addition and alterations, and to modify the existing elevations to include multi-pane windows, to come back to staff for approval for project 7447.
Or is there a second?
Mr. Chair, I'll second it.
All right, thank you, Brian. All right, discussion.
So my first discussion is windows. So if you look at the front of the house, the lights are 9/9. So what we're shown in the drawing to the rear elevation for 4th Avenue, that we're seeing 4/4. Is it truly 4/4?
Yes, sir, it is. So the windows that are larger in scale, the front windows are 9/9, and then the window that's on the side on 4th Avenue, you have to move your cursor over a little bit, Amanda. It's hidden behind that tree. Is 4/4. So, that happens on the other side as well. So any of the windows that are smaller in scale are 4/4, and then the larger windows are 9/9.
Amanda, I hate to interject, but as I'm looking at that, these appear to be 6/6.
Those existing ones, yes. I was talking about the historic one that is on the historic brick portion.
I see.
On the left, the bottom left.
Yeah, it's actually next to the chimney.
Yes, the one next to the, you can see it on our
There you
elevation.
go.
Yes, that one is a 4/4.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm pulling up my pictures right now. I'm 95% positive it's the same way on the other short end, on the opposite side, the courtyard side.
So Susan, so with the motion was said multi-light, are you suggesting 4/4?
Well, I think that, Mr. Laster, that each window may be different, because there's several different sizes. So I think that's why I say would come back to staff, because I can't say that it all be 4/4 because that may not work. And I think I see Amanda McCrary shaking her head as well. I think that they would have to be, considered, per size.
I would agree with that because, I'm big into windows too, Brian, that. I don't think that a one size fits all is ever appropriate for windows because we want to always maintain that proportion in the panes that is taller than it is wider, that historic proportion. I would agree, but I did verify, I pulled up my pictures. That is definitely a 4/4 historic window as shown on the left side. So I think it would probably be a combination of 4/4 and maybe 6/6, depending on the size and the proportion of the overall window. We have a really great book in our library about this too, and we'll consult that as well as to the historic proportions of the windows faces the overall.
And I will add that if someone is building a colonial revival, is that they will be multi-pane windows. And they would not be a 1/1. And I think that's the problem I'm having because this elevation is it's so visible. I think it is very visible. And so I think that's why I am concerned about the windows. I think, Amanda, I have to say you've done a beautiful job on this latest iteration of this. So I want to say that because it really works. So I want that to be clear.
Yeah, and I have to echo that as well. The simplification of the lines pays great homage to this rare federal style that we have in Franklin. And so just to comment back to the windows, and I agree with you, Susan, and Amanda, both Amandas on the multi-pane. But I would also ask to consider that maybe on the part that is the garage portion and the window in between, that those might stay 1/1. And that way you differentiate between the two sections of the building. But that's food for thought.
Yeah, I think we could definitely sketch it up several different ways and look at it and see. And is it my assumption that if we do that, we will take it to you, Amanda?
I think
That's the way I'm hearing this motion.
I
Me
think
too.
that, the motion that's on the table, and I'll just say it from my perspective, because I'm the one interpreting it and the end of things, that it asks for multi-pane. So I know that I might not be the favorite person here and asking for any amendments to the motion, but if there is a desire to have 1/1 on any portion of the building, I do think that needs to be reflected in the certificate of appropriateness. The certificate of appropriateness is utilized pretty handedly by staff in order to ensure that any alterations meet the intent of the commission. And so it's really important that we make sure those are exactly the way they need to be, so the staff's not guessing what the intent of the commission was at a later date.
I'm perfectly comfortable with the original motion, Amanda.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, another thing I would like to discuss is the garage portion of the building. Since this is so highly exposed from the street, has it been contemplated to change, since you're ripping off the front of the garage, to change the front of the garage and the back where the doors will be to brick? I feel like we've got just such a run of siding going down a street in a historic district. And even if the brick were painted or didn't match perfectly, with the distance between, I just asked for the applicant to comment on that.
So I definitely understand the concern there for sure. And that's one of the reasons we propose putting shutters on that side too, to start to differentiate it and give it some depth. It would be difficult to change it to brick because we are taking off the bump out of the garage, but the primary line of the garage stays and all the other 3 walls stay, and the foundation as is not built to support brick. So that would require, we're trying our best to not mess with the foundation. We've had a structural engineer out there and that was their recommendation. So that's why it's okay to take some things off because we can put some trees back, but building, it's that part's tricky. I definitely understand the concern, but the foundation of the supporting of the brick would be the challenge that we would have. So we did look at that and look at adding the shutters to that portion and not the rest of the portion. That's also something that you see a lot in federal style architecture and federal style additions. It's very carefully showing shutters. They don't always go on all windows, but then also adding that vent in the top too, to give it a little bit of relief. So it's not just a giant thing of siding. I also think that the crew that we have working on this has done some phenomenal projects with some landscaping as well. And I think that the intent is to soften that because there's an existing courtyard there that we intend to keep. And there's already some brick fencing and some stuff there. So I think, again, part of it is that 2D drawing, but I think a lot of that too will be softened on that end with the courtyard that's there and landscaping.
Mr. Chair, that answers my concern.
Thank you. Any other comments? And I'm going to read this motion when we're through with comments, as I've written it down.
Mr. Chair, I have some comments or questions.
Right.
Do we have an existing left side, existing elevation? I didn't see one.
I mean, photograph or elevation?
Just anything. I just want to see left side.
We don't have anything existing on the left. I did note that as I was reviewing it. I try to use some vantages from Street View. I can try to pull up a tool to see if I can provide anything to you on the screen right now.
Because looking through.
If you go to SK10,
10.
That is
10. That's from the back looking forward.
Right. So this is it's just really hard to photograph.
Yes.
It is. It's
Yes.
really, really tight. And that's as wide angle as I can get. But it has this existing portion here is the same that you see below. And everything pretty much in this drawing, everything there is original as is, except for the second floor portion that pops out above the bottom portion. And so
I was looking through, and I don't know exactly which drawing it was. Oh, here we go. On SK12, it appears the existing 1900s edition has a chimney. Are we losing that chimney?
there is a chimney there. The fireplace is not functional at the moment at all. It has been closed in. From the exterior, yes, there is a chimney there. And that was part of the reason we looked at anchoring this addition with another chimney, is that it's in a general vicinity of where it was. We like that look from a federal standpoint. Again, it anchors an elevation and a gable that's very common on additions on a federal style house. And it also just gives a nod to the story that was there instead of just taking it off. It is our intention to use a tumbled brick. We don't intend on using a typical brick that you would see, spec shiny brick, the lacks of better terms that you would see.
Ms. Rose, would you speak to what the guidelines state about chimneys?
Yes, definitely. The guidelines do encourage the maintenance of chimneys. With this particular application, because it is an upper level, it was understood by staff that based on where it's proposed, that would be compromised as part of it. The guidelines are clear that additions be placed on lesser visible elevations. This is a rather complicated application because there is a substantial addition in place already that is highly visible. So it would cause the loss of this, but additions do cause the loss pretty often of historic features on rear elevations or wherever they're mounted in order to physically connect them to the building itself. That is a very valid point you bring, and it would be encouraged that those elements be maintained where that's able to occur.
Thank you.
I just had a comment regarding the 1900s addition. If it was placed there in 1900, then don't our guidelines read that as a historic structure?
Are you asking staff or?
Yeah, staff.
The applicant. Okay. Yes, it is definitely a historic structure. This application involves addition that without any sort of impartiality. I would say that this 1981 edition was completed in a way that would not be encouraged by our current guidelines, but it in fact was completed prior to this being a historic district, and did try to maintain certain philosophical ideals of historic preservation in doing so, in maintaining the original structure. Then the 1900 structure, while still visible from the roof and the left side of the structure as it rests currently, was integrated pretty fully on certain portions of it with the 1981 structure. So it becomes really difficult when the design professional is working with something that has been compromised and has been altered over the course of time. The role of the staff here at the historic zoning level would be to try to maintain that as much as possible. And to your point, Ms. Marquardt, the proposal for an addition to cover a portion of that does cover a portion of that. In looking at this application, it was important to staff to ensure that the vantage points of this addition as currently seen from street view, which is very little, still be maintained. And so the design that you see in this upper corner is largely untouched, as Ms. McCurry said. You do have a pretty unique roof line extending from the building, and that you can see that here. And so it's very clear that the 1900 portion is untouched, and that this portion will be pressed back off of it, but also pressed back off the other side to help maintain the corner that is highly visible on the other side of the very original form. It's a very long, convoluted explanation, but I hope it helps.
No, thank you for clarifying. Yeah, that does help.
Any other comments?
Yes, to speak to Lisa and Kelly's point, if we were tearing down and demolishing that 1900 structure, I would have trouble with voting and yes for that. But all we're doing is adding to the top of it.
That's right.
So the structure stays.
Any other comments? So I've got a motion to approve this application with the modification of the existing windows to a multi-panel window, and for that to come back to staff. Wait a minute, multi-panel or 1/1 in certain cases, and all of that to come back to staff for approval. Is that clear with everybody?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
just
sir.
one multi-pane.
Pane, and I wrote that, I multi-pane and said multi-panel. Thank you. Ms. Rose and I will collaborate to make sure this is correctly stated in the minutes. So if there are no other questions or comments let's vote. Ms. Baker?
Aye.
Ms. Besser?
Aye.
Mr. Laster?
Aye.
Ms. Marquardt?
Aye.
Ms. Pierce?
Aye.
Ms. Worthington?
Aye.
And Mr. Roberts, aye. Amanda McCrary, thank you very much. This is great work, and thank you.
Thank you.
I know Ms. Fisher will be delighted.
We are excited. I think Ms. Fisher's pretty excited too. So
I know
stay
she will
tuned.
be. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Okay, that's all on our agenda. I think we have a couple of things, though. One is Ms. Gibson might have an announcement. Is she still on the line?
She is.
Give us an update on you, Ms. Gibson.
Sure. So this unfortunately will be my last historic zoning meeting. I'm moving on to a different position with the National Trust for Historic Preservation in DC. It's been a pleasure to work with all of you. I have learned so much hearing your different perspectives and all the different projects and your different personalities and your different, I guess, philosophies and how you approach preservation has been really enriching to me during my time at the city. So thank you to you all.
Well, thank you and good luck. And you already have our condition of leaving us is the fact that anything that comes before you from Williamson County is automatically approved.
Of course.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
We'll
that's
miss
right.
you.
Thank you so much.
Are there
It's been a
any
pleasure.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
I'll miss you all too.
Any
Wishing
other
you all the
items to discuss? Amanda, you got anything else?
I don't, just that we have DRC at 4 o'clock on Tuesday. And I think as of the end of this evening, we will have 2 or 3 items. So it should be fairly short. Thank you.
Oh, that's dangerously said. Okay, then I need a motion.
Knocking on wood.
Knocking on wood. Kathy, welcome again. Kathy Worthington. Motion to adjourn then by somebody. I think that was Mary, I heard.
Yeah, so moved.
Thank you. Second to that.
Second. I'll second that, Mr. Chair. This is
Thank you,
Susan.
Susan. All right. Kelly Baker,
Aye.
Susan Besser,
Aye.
Brian Laster,
Aye.
Lisa Marquardt,
Aye.
Mary Pierce,
Aye.
Kathy Worthington,
Aye.
Jim Roberts. Aye. Thank you all very much. See you next Monday.